Hey, you guys, what's up? It's Ben Greenfield. I hope you're ready for some epic biohacking tips on today's episode. Are you a biohacker? Or do you want to be a biohacker? Or do you get jealous of all the biohackers you see walking down the street? Well, then today's episode is going to blow your mind. But before we jump into today's show, I want to tell you about this stuff called Reach Higher. Reach Higher. And no, it's not an arm lengthening service or some kind of biohack for breaking your legs and elongating the bones in your femurs. It's actually these two different formulas that this company called Reach Higher Nutrition developed. And they're really interesting, like unique formulas. One is tryptophan, tyrosine, taurine, GABA, whatever that is. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. And phenylalanine, if I can talk today. Anyways, you put all that together, and what it does is those are all things that fill the voids in the everyday diet, specifically different amino acids that assist with neurotransmitter formation. So it helps to decrease anxiety, and it helps to prevent food cravings and all these weird things that can happen when you have neurotransmitter imbalances. It's called state of mind. And then, as if that weren't enough, the same company, Reach Higher Nutrition, they also developed this other one called state of sleep, which is kind of similar. It's tryptophan, it's GABA, which is like an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's taurine and it's glycine. And it's specifically for people who have trouble kind of like staying asleep, and also people who wake up not feeling as though they're very well rested. It works really well for both of those issues. So you can learn more about them, and you can also get a 20% discount off of anything they make over at reachhighernutrition.com. Just like it sounds like, reachhighernutrition.com. And the code that you want to use is BEN20. That gets you 20% off, BEN20 at reachhighernutrition.com. So check out these all natural formulas with no weird things in them, just natural stuff your body's kind of supposed to make, but it just helps to fill in the voids. This podcast is also brought to you by crickets. High quality organic crickets. No, I'm totally not kidding. The crickets themselves are bringing you this podcast episode on their tiny little cricket backs. No, actually, they make, believe it or not, they being Crick Nutrition, protein powder that's GMO free and gluten free and soy free and lactose free and has no added sugars or colors or artificial ingredients with a laser focus on quality. It packs 3 times the protein punch of beef. It blows away even organ meats in terms of nutrient density. It is pretty much just like dehydrated, ground up crickets. Totally not kidding. It sounds weird, but it actually tastes really good. It's got more iron than beef and spinach. It's got as much calcium as milk. It's got more potassium than the highest potassium foods that exist, like avocado. It's got zinc. It's got magnesium. And the best thing is that they're sustainable and ethical. So you get 15% off of this unique approach to protein powder if you go to the following URL, crick.me. That's CRIK.me, crick.me/BG Fitness. And the code that you use, I know that's a mouthful, crick.me/BG Fitness. The code that you use is BEN. And BEN gets you 15% off. If you're a little bit about using cricket protein powder, know that there's a 100% money back guarantee. There's some cricket confidence for you. So check it out. crick.me/BG Fitness. Use code BEN to save 15%. And now on to today's biohacking epic sauce. In this episode of the Ben Greenfield Fitness Show,
what our ancestors would have been walking on is very rich soil, properly aerated with earthworms that weren't killed by chemicals that didn't exist yet, would have a great water holding capacity, wonderful crumb structure to it. So basically our ancestors were rebounding all day. I did a 3-hour meditation, but it only took me 5 minutes. So I biohack my way into such a deep meditative state by squeezing my pelvic floor muscles. What that does is it sends an energetic wave of Kundalini energy up through all the chakras.
He's an expert in human performance and nutrition. Voted America's top personal trainer and one of the globe's most influential people in health and fitness. His show provides you with everything you need to optimize physical and mental performance. He is Ben Greenfield.
Power, speed, mobility, balance. Whatever it is for you, that's the natural movement. Get out there. When you look at all the studies done, studies that have shown the greatest efficacy.
All the information you need in one place, right here, right now, on the Ben Greenfield Fitness Podcast.
Hey folks, it's Ben Greenfield, and my guest on today's show is actually one of the world's, I would consider him to be one of the world's leading biohackers, a guy that I've kind of looked up to and watched for a while. And he's also a pretty well-versed and highly educated expert on nutrition. He is a fitness coach. He's also a spirituality guru. As a matter of fact, he's just written a brand new book called How to Be Ultra Spiritual, 12 and a half Steps to Spiritual Superiority. He may indeed be one of the most cutting-edge guests who I've ever had on the show when it comes to basically like a full working knowledge of everything from ancestrally appropriate diets, you know, like ketosis and veganism, as our ancestors would have eaten, to really efficient workout strategies like thermogenesis and hypoxic training, to optimizing your gut health with some pretty cool little known fringe tactics, to of course achieving, like I mentioned earlier, the most important thing, ultimate spiritual enlightenment. So I think we're going to have a really, really good chat today. His work empowers people of all levels from around the globe to live much more meaningful lives. And I know he's experienced the ability to even inspire great thinkers like Tony Robbins and me. And he has a really popular YouTube channel as well. And I will link to all of his really, really good information if you just go to bengreenfieldfitness.com/spiritual. That's bengreenfieldfitness.com/spiritual. If you don't know how to spell spiritual, just Google it. Anyways, though, also, if you hear in the background, and I'm going to apologize to you, JP, my guest on today's show. If you hear in the background the sound of something like an air compression, that's not me farting. I'm actually wearing my compression boots while we're podcasting today because I'm at my standing workstation, and kind of. I think they're good for the blood flow going up and down, and they'll also keep me from getting a deep vein thrombosis as we record.
That's good. I'm going to use that excuse the next time I'm in bed with my girlfriend and I have gas. I'll just let her know I have compression boots on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're not compression boots. They're gradated compression boots.
That sounds like a made-up word. But Ben, I want to tell you, with your introduction of me, which I can't believe you got an introduction of me in under 45 minutes. So even with your abbreviated introduction, I think you kind of played it pretty humble, maybe a little too humble. I mean, I know you mentioned you've learned a lot from me, but I think we should also mention that I've taught you everything you know, and I've even taught you more than you know. So I know you as being humble, and I'm pretty humble too. I'm actually the most humble person I know, but I just thought the listeners would really benefit in knowing whatever it was I just said.
Yeah, well, most people, they do know that I haven't really professed much in the past to have a mentor per se, but as far as like a guru and an instructor and an educator and someone who really has taught me most of what I know, you're basically at the top of the totem pole. So
yeah, well, thank you. I love totem poles, really any kind of pole I love. And I also endorse the idea of not having mentors. I think just like your perspective, a guru is much superior to a mentor and way cheaper. because gurus don't charge fees. Mentors usually do, but gurus typically have mandatory donations that are a much higher, not fee, but shall we say, monetary commitment.
Right, exactly. Man, there's so many places that we could start here, JP. And for those of you not familiar with my guest, his full name is JP Sears. JP Sears. By the way, JP, what does JP stand for?
Just perfect.
Okay, just perfect. So JP has a YouTube channel that is extremely educational. It's perfect for families, for children to gather around and watch during dinner, for example, which we usually do on a nightly basis, just so my kids can get exposed to my own, personal guru. But one of the things, one of the more kind of like family friendly topics that I want to just delve into right away here, because I noticed it's one of the newer videos that you've posted, is weed, specifically the marijuana version of weed. And I'm curious, just because so many people are kind of into plant-based medicine these days, everything from microdosing to going on vision quests. What is your take on marijuana in terms of kind of the debate right now as far as legalization of it?
Yeah, well, first off, I feel like we would both be a little more astute if we called marijuana cannabis. Is that okay with you, Ben?
Yeah, I think cannabis would probably be a little bit more scientific, or cannabidiol, or cannabis.
Yeah, we'll
or
just
Mary Jane.
Sophisticate up this conversation a little bit. And before we get into the specifics of cannabis, you mentioned microdosing. Mm-hmm. And from my mind hacking experience, what I find far more effective than microdosing is macrodosing. So in this case, more of a substance is always going to give you a more powerful result.
Interesting.
The evidence hasn't really come back as a more powerful result, actually a better result or not. We don't really know. But microdosing is not going to give you a powerful result. So back to your question
profound, by the way.
Thank you. We should record this and let other people listen to it.
I am. I pressed record when we first, I don't know if I told you that.
Wow. I am. Those are powerful words, Ben. You're so majestic.
Mm-hmm.
So legalizing cannabis, I think cannabis, it should be illegal to make it illegal, which like two negatives multiplied together make a positive. So should it be legalized? Yes, that's only math.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have to look at with cannabis is it's a medicine. It's not an herb. It's not a plant. It's a plant medicine. And I think way more effective than using any kind of medicine to treat a symptom is using the medicine to prevent issues from coming up. So you know how some people would go to their doctor and get a prescription because they've got back pain and
right.
Bowels that just like unleash.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say we need to take those medications before we have the problem, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So when we're looking at a very powerful natural medicine like cannabis, we realize there's a lot of diseases that we need to prevent.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what that means, Ben?
What?
It means you need to use a lot of cannabis and you need to use it often, because we're out to prevent, not treat.
That's true. And that's probably really one of the more flawed aspects of Western medicine when you think about it, is this concept of, popping pills to put a Band-Aid over an issue versus macrodosing with plant-based medicine to put a Band-Aid over an issue.
Yeah. Why use a pill when you can inhale smoke?
Right.
To put a Band-Aid over the issue. And, it is a scientific fact, in my opinion, that there are no addictive qualities about cannabis. So it's completely safe. I know people who have used cannabis every single day, multiple times per day for the past 20 years, and they haven't gotten addicted. So we need to really realize we're dealing with a substance that has no negative consequences. In fact, it's the first substance that we've ever discovered that has no negative consequences. It's really a miracle.
What's sad is that more people don't really know about the health effects of it and the non-addictive properties, when in fact it could probably heal a lot of folks. I mean, you take one of the really the ravages of our modern post-industrial era, and that would be something that I guess it might fly under the radar a lot these days, but you're seeing it mentioned more and more. And that would be this concept of gluten, GLUT. I'm blanking. I think it's
like glutton.
Yeah. It's not important, but basically the idea is that it apparently is responsible for most of the diseases that people get, that marijuana, or any of these plant-based medicines could easily fix.
Cannabis.
But I know, cannabis. I know that you've personally done quite a bit of studying up on this thing that's basically ravaging society. This gluten thing. I think a lot of people though don't even know about whether or not they're personally sensitive to it. So, when we're talking about using cannabis to heal a variety of diseases, I think gluten would probably be a disease that's at the top of that list. But how can somebody figure out whether or not they can personally actually handle gluten?
Well, Ben, gluten is not a disease. It's a protein found in grains that will cause diseases.
Okay.
I would write that down. So how you can figure out, can you handle gluten? Here's the test. And this is as medical as it can get. Can you go to a restaurant and order a damn meal off the menu without altering it? If so, chances are your body does just fine with gluten. But if you go to a restaurant and you need to talk to the waiter for 15 minutes, making substitutions and asking questions, and coming at the waiter with a sense of asserting your dominance over them through dogmatic feelings of victimization and a self-righteous attitude, then there's a really good chance you're actually sensitive to gluten.
Interesting. That's a good test. It seems it would probably be more accurate than like some of these skin prick or blood tests.
Yeah, the antibodies in the blood and the saliva, they don't really behave like our behavior does.
Right.
So just observing your behavior is the most direct way to notice whether or not you're gluten intolerant. And I've been gluten intolerant my whole life. And I've really worked hard to up my game of being gluten intolerant. Now I've progressed to the point where I'm intolerant to people who can tolerate gluten. So I've been getting great results. I've also recently had my mother arrested for attempted murder because she fed me gluten when I was a child.
Seriously?
Yeah. And Ben, do you know what can happen after 97 years of low-grade intestinal inflammation? It can actually kill a person. So, we've got some indictments going out against my mom.
Wow. I've heard about the, for example, like the gut-brain axis before and how eating certain things can affect the nervous system. I didn't really realize that there was a direct correlation, though, between gluten and death.
Not just death, but murder.
So what would be an example of a common substitute that you might make at a restaurant to elucidate whether or not you actually are gluten intolerant?
Well, elucidate isn't really a word, but I'm going to take your question anyway, Ben. Typically, what I like to do is substitute bread that tastes good in favor of bread that's really a coagulated brick of mysterious flours that has the density of a black hole and the dryness of a desert. It's just really enjoyable to pretend that I'm enjoying the gluten-free alternatives.
Right, exactly. And do you, when you consume that type of bread and they bring that gluten-free bread out as a substitute, do you eat that by itself, or are you into this concept of I guess it goes by the name now more or less of ketosis, where you're somehow stabilizing your blood sugar or lowering your blood sugar, or lowering your inflammation, or even increasing your IQ by anywhere from 100 to 200 points by adding actual fats in along with the gluten-free bread?
Yeah, so I'm always doing a ketogenic diet, except when I want to eat carbohydrates.
Right.
And so with that said, I typically have my bread and butter with just butter, lots of it, because, the thing I like best about ketosis is that everybody's talking about it. Mm-hmm. And don't tell anybody this, but there's a part of me that feels left out when other people are doing things and I'm not doing that thing.
Right. Okay. So in terms of something like ketosis and the fact that it sounds like you've been doing it for a while, do you have tips that you've discovered, like practical tips for someone if they really wanted to maximize their blood levels of ketones or their level of ketosis?
Yeah, we need to take the theory, we'll call it the discourse we've already given on microdosing, mm-hmm. and realizing that macrodosing is actually more than microdosing and therefore superior to microdosing.
Right.
And we want to apply that to ketosis and realize that if fat is a good thing, then an absurd amount of fat is a better thing. Right. So how do you know if
more is better is a core health concept that, we endorse that on this show quite a bit when it comes to anything from ketosis to avoiding gluten to smoking marijuana or any of these things. But I interrupted you. So more is better.
Well, yeah, and that sounds like a well thought out and mm-hmm. pretty responsible philosophy. Mm-hmm. And if more is better, then we'd also realize that best is better than better is. Mm-hmm. And what's best is when we monitor our blood levels of ketones, how we know we've had too much fat, we're a little too ketogenic, if you will, mm-hmm. is when we start to have a small amount of what we might call disaster pants. So when you're just meeting that threshold, and which the beauty of this test is you don't have to bother using any instruments with your blood to measure anything. You just observe your underpants. So when you're noticing a small amount of disaster pants, that's the point where you want to consume a lot more fat.
Okay, got it. So in the presence of something like anal leakage, for example, you would actually use that as a sign. I
didn't know we were talking about sex, but go on. I'm intrigued.
Would you actually use that as a sign of a need for more fats then, if you were experiencing things like like fatty based stools in your underpants or even in the toilet bowl, for example? That's actually a sign that you need more fats.
Yeah, so if it's a small amount of anal leakage, that's the sign that you need a lot more fats. But if it's a large amount of anal leakage, so let's just say you have to change not only your underpants, but also your pants. So that test results coming back and saying okay, I've had a large amount of anal leakage and I probably don't need to eat any more fat for at least 15 more minutes.
Okay, got it. So you really wouldn't need like a breath ketone measurement device, or say like a blood ketone strip. A lot of people use like the Precision Extra blood ketone strips to see if they're 1 millimolar or 3 millimolar. Basically, what you do is you just pull down your pants and you look at the actual amount of crap or fat that you've deposited into your pants, and that allows you to at least approximate your millimolar levels.
Yeah, and I realize we're not really defining crap. A lot of people will define it with a sense of solidness, but that's
Right.
not really what we're dealing with. We're dealing more like in a liquid state.
Okay.
Ben, you know how matter can either be in a solid, liquid, or a gaseous state. Right now, we're not talking about gas or solid, but the liquid state.
Okay.
So let's just realize that's how we're defining crap. And with those measurement devices, I personally don't endorse them for two reasons. One, I don't know how to use them. Two, they cost money, and I would rather just spend money on other things that I would enjoy more.
Right.
Which, ironically, I have a very large portion of my budget each month devoted to buying new underpants.
Right. Right, exactly. Well, I mean that plus cannabis, it starts to add up, as the two main staples of a good healthy, I guess spiritual guru would be how I define you at this point. Although yeah. I know you have plenty of other titles that we could go by. When it comes to this ketogenic diet thing, though, I think one of the trickiest parts is actually getting enough fat, actually figuring out ways to maximize fat intake. Because, I mean, let's face it can be hard to find good fat sources these days. It's few and far between, in between these giant loaves of gluten-free brick-like bread. So when it comes to you and the ways that you've biohacked your ability to be able to deposit more fat into your mouth, do you have any tips for people who really, really want to maximize their ketosis through something like increased intake of fat?
Well, I think the magical way to do that is with coconut oil. And really, the challenge that a lot of people face when they're trying to increase their fat intake to a degree that's far beyond what their body can actually use is we actually have a reflex that comes up. We get the hormone CCK released, cholecystokinin, and it can actually make you want to throw up when you're eating way too much fat for yourself. So you have to really, really learn how to suppress your gag reflex. So, Ben, if you wouldn't mind, like maybe I could just ask you to write a blog post on how to maximize a ketogenic diet by suppressing your gag reflex. I think you would be a good person to bring that information out into the world.
Right. So basically you're talking about like the opposite of bulimia. Rather than eating a lot of food and then purging, you would want to eat as much fat as possible and then figure out a way to actually somehow keep yourself from throwing it back up.
Absolutely. So just like you said, it's the opposite of an eating disorder. It's eating order.
Right. Right. Exactly. It makes sense. I mean, it's logical that this would be, an orderly way of eating. When it comes to, you mentioned coconut oil, and I know you mentioned butter as well. Do you have any ways that you actually, I guess, maximize the delivery of that? Like, is there a certain type of blending that would actually allow you to get as much of the butter or the coconut oil as possible without triggering that gag reflex?
Well, first off, I will say that I used to just eat coconuts, trying to get enough coconut oil, and it's not going to work. Besides, like when I would eat the shell of the coconut, that like I can't say for sure, but I think that actually caused severe intestinal bleeding, far worse than anything gluten would cause. So now I'm not
plants,
a fan of
plants can be toxic to the intestinal tract.
Yeah.
I mean, when you compare them to things like butter or coconut oil or cannabis or gluten, they're probably pretty high up there in terms of their ability to cause damage.
Yeah, that's weird. So when I was eating the broken shards of the coconut shell, you're right, it probably had some kind of toxin in it that when released, it would actually cause tearing in my small intestine.
There's actually, There's a lot of really interesting evidence. I don't know if you've seen this about how plants have like this built-in mechanism to where when you eat them, they can cause digestive damage because the plant's seed, the plants are intelligent. They want their seed or their fruit to be more or less, as gross as it is to think about, but I guess we've ventured into this territory already. They want to be pooped out in different places by the mammals that eat them. So it would make sense, that ancient man at some point probably would have developed almost like this relationship with the coconut, and specifically eating the entire shell of the coconut, to where their gut might have developed that response of bleeding, for example, in response to coconut shards. So it seems like a pretty ancestral response. But what did you do? Did you just figure out a different way to get at the coconut fats?
Yeah, so I just started buying jars of coconut oil. It's seemingly far easier. And I think the key to getting enough fats through coconut oil is to use coconut oil not only on everything, but for everything. I use coconut oil in my hair. I use coconut oil in my sex life. I think coconut oil is excellent at preventing cancer because coconuts don't get cancer, therefore, do the math.
Yeah,
coconuts will prevent cancer.
Right.
And I can't really say enough about how wonderful my hair looks. Ben, have you heard of Native Americans?
I believe so. You mean Americans who are actually who are native, or who?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they arrived, I'm not sure what it was, like 10 years or 20 years after Christopher Columbus discovered America. So what the Native Americans
and they invented popcorn, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. And they decided to voluntarily give up all their land to people with guns.
Right.
It's interesting. But anyway, the Native Americans have a belief that when you have long hair, your hair actually acts as a spiritual antenna to absorb energy and information from the cosmos. And because I believe that to be true, why wouldn't it work with coconut oil? So I have a theory, and I think theoretically, my theory is more than just a theory, that putting coconut oil on your hair not only makes your hair look damn good, but it helps you absorb more coconut oil than if you were just eating it. And it helps you absorb the energy of the coconut oil better.
Interesting. There's actually a really good book about this. It's by a guy named Bruce Lipton. It's the biology of belief, and he goes into about how a lot of these like photons or invisible variables, without us actually touching them, can indeed enhance our bodies. And it sounds to me like a perfect example of this would be like putting coconut oil into your hair. That would actually allow you to get more of specifically things like the photons or the energetic frequencies that the coconut oil carries. But it also sounds like it's a perfect way to deliver extra fats to the body. And possibly, have you found that when you put it in your hair, based on your measurements of ketosis, that you tend to go deeper into ketosis, or you tend to cycle through your underpants a little bit more frequently?
I'd like to think so, Ben. I need to pay a little bit more attention to that before the results are really in. But what I can say is when I wear underpants on my head, they definitely get greasier faster than when I don't have underpants on my head. Right, exactly.
Yeah, and by the way, you do have a beautiful head of hair. For those of you listening in, I'll put a picture of JP over at bengreenfeldfitness.com/spiritual if you would like. And one other question before we switch to maybe talking a little bit more about plants than fats. When it comes to coconut oil or to butter, did you have any other tips that you wanted to give folks in terms of like maximizing their oil or fat intake, aside from, obviously one of the more beneficial tips you've given out so far, putting it in your hair to increase absorption?
Yeah, well, we definitely want to put lots of grass-fed butter and lots of MCT oil or coconut oil, if you're poor, into your coffee and blend the crap out of it. It is absolutely divine, and it's trendy. When you have trendy multiplied by divine or divinity or division, then it's not multiplication anymore because it's division.
Yeah, that makes sense. Plus, it's a very good way. I think I saw you do. It may have been on PubMed. It also may have been on your YouTube channel. The fact that actually allows you to stay in a more fasted state when you add as much butter as possible to the coffee, or as much coconut oil or MCT oil to the coffee. Is that correct?
Yeah, I love doing intermittent fasting. And I find it just so mysterious how when I eat 1,700 calories worth of fat in my coffee, like I don't need to eat food as long as I drink my food. So it helps me stay committed to my fast much more easily. It's almost like I get full when I eat a full amount of calories by drinking them through coffee. So that's the best way to fast, by making sure to get a good 1,700 calories worth of fat in your coffee.
Yeah. Hey, I want to interrupt today's show to tell you about how you too can blast your nether regions with painless, high-frequency acoustic sound waves. No, this is not a joke. Yes, I actually did this to myself, and yes, I actually turned myself into what I would consider to be the ultimate sex machine when I did it. Guys can do it. Girls can do it. And it's called Gains Wave. And again, no, I'm not kidding. Like, you can take Viagra and you can take Cialis and you can get all of the liver issues and the eye blurriness and the dependency and the addiction that comes with those little blue pills, not to mention the ongoing expense for the rest of your life. Or you can go in and within 20 minutes be waltzing back out of this special clinic. There's 60 of them all over the US, and it basically restores life and vitality and youthiness. Yes, I made up that word, to your crotch. It is a painless, high-frequency acoustic wave that they apply via this special wand to your nether regions, and you essentially break open old blood vessels, you form new ones, you get better size, you get better feeling, you get better libido. The list of benefits are huge, pun intended. And I went in there, I did the treatment, and I was, and I am extremely pleased with the results that I got. And so is my wife. Anyways, so you can text the word Greenfield to 3131 31 to get $150 off of a Gains Wave treatment. It's called Gains Wave. You could also, if you want to, just go to gainswave.com and click Find a Doctor to find a Gains Wave provider near you. Anyways, though, check them out. A really unique approach to libido and sexual performance, but an approach that actually frigging works. Speaking of something else that's unique, there is this concept that if you combine digestive enzymes with probiotics, then what happens is that the probiotics become more bioavailable and the enzymes do a much better job breaking down proteins and other nutrients in the foods that you eat. So you get better immune system function, you get better digestion of protein, so you don't get a bunch of like undigested protein in your gut, and you get better mental clarity and focus because protein breaks down to form neurotransmitters, which your brain needs and the rest of your body too. So there's this company that's developed like two different things that you take as like a 1-2 punch compoundation, and it's enzymes with probiotics. So the first part of this 1-2 combo is called Masszymes. The second part, the probiotic part, is called P3OM, which is made with special protein digesting probiotics. You put the two together and it's a amazing when it comes to actually digesting protein, improving the health of your immune system, assisting with muscle recovery, whole bunch of cool effects. So you get 10% off of this 1-2 combo of mass zymes and what's called P3OM. Sounds like something out of Star Wars. Probiotic. You go to bengreenfieldfitness.com/biopt. That's bengreenfieldfitness.com/BIOPT. And when you go there, you will automatically get that 10% off. No discount code required. No thinking required. You just go there and order. bengreenfieldfitness.com/biops. Check it out. And now back to today's show. It's sad how much we've kind of like strayed from our ancestral roots by doing things like consuming, grains and cereals as a breakfast or as a way to bring in the day, or for example, frying up pastured eggs, or having something like toast. I mean, these are
so unnatural.
Yeah, it's a crazy post-industrial practice, but I mean, I like that you highlight the fact that we actually we can almost like hack ourselves into a more ancestral way of living by doing something like getting our 9,000 to 17,000 calories in the morning with our coffee by blending some of these fats into the coffee and staying as our ancestors would have in that ketogenic or that intermittent fasted state for as long as possible. It's just sad to me that more people haven't tapped into it.
Just like the ancestors.
Right. Now, what if somebody really doesn't respond well to all this fat? Like they just don't feel good. They get brain fog. They get high cholesterol, which we know now doesn't cause heart disease, but can at least result in some pretty intense arguments on Reddit. If somebody doesn't respond well to that fat, do you have tips if someone wanted to switch to a vegan or vegetarian-based diet? Like, are there good ways that someone can become vegan or can enhance veganism once they're there?
Yeah, I mean, some people will catch veganism naturally, but if someone actually wants to self-induce the disease state, there are a few tips that I have. One is it's so important to project your self-hatred onto people who eat meat. I mean, that's going to save you years of nutritional trial and error trying to get complete proteins from plants. It's just going to, it's a biohack to veganism. That was beautiful. Felt very poetic. And I also, as a hardcore vegan for my past 3 lifetimes, I think all of us vegans can realize that what we stand for is the complete eradication of animals off the face of the earth. Because it's clear that as vegans, we think it's not only wrong to eat animals, we think it's wrong to be an animal. And I think together, if vegans can unite and if we can infect more people, then together as a whole, we can really rid the world of animals.
But aren't there ways that we could take animal foods and somehow make them a little bit more vegan or a little bit more plant-based?
Well, if you're talking about plant-based meat substitutes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, when we do the math, we figure out, okay, if you're a vegan, then what you want most is the taste of meat,
right?
The texture of meat, as well as the sensation that an animal was murdered and you're about to eat it. I mean, we want all those things as vegans. Right. So going for the plant-based meat substitutes is obviously a given. Tofurkey, tofikin, and if you're into like big game meat substitutes, tofuna is a wonderful pretend fish.
Or tofafalo is another good one.
Absolutely. They really, really used to pretend to roam the earth.
Speaking of the Native Americans, I'm pretty sure that was one of the staples in their diets, in addition to popcorn, was the tofafalo.
Yeah. So it's very logical that as vegans, for us to thrive, we need to do our best to pretend to eat the substance that we despise the most and are disgusted by the most.
Right. So basically, the trick to being an effective vegan or vegetarian is to take animals and figure out a way to actually using, tofu or soy or whatever, actually mold that particular plant-based substitute into the shape and the texture and the taste of the animal that you are avoiding eating.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So let's do a practical case study, because I know the listeners are really deep into their prefrontal cortex at this point. So Ben, I'm curious, what food disgusts you the most?
I'd say probably ribeye steak, sweet potato fries, and chocolate ice cream.
Got it. So that all disgusts you. So now what your homework is figure out how to make a meal that tastes like ribeye steak, sweet potato fries, and a chocolate milkshake without using any of those ingredients to make the same meal. Does that make sense?
Right. Okay. So I'm trying to actually eliminate those particular foods from my diet, but still have substitutes that allow them to look and feel like those meals.
And taste like those meals. Absolutely.
Okay. So I could use, for example, like tree bark grilled with thyme and rosemary as a substitute for the ribeye steak. I could use, for example, some kind of a bean, like a hard bean with perhaps I suppose like ketchup could tie it in for the sweet potato fries. And then for the chocolate milkshake, what would you do? I'm having trouble with that one, for the chocolate ice cream or chocolate milkshake.
Yeah, for the chocolate milkshake, have you heard of fecal transplants, Ben?
I have. Fecal transplant therapy. That's actually one way I believe that you can transform an old mouse into a young mouse.
Exactly. And I don't really know what that means, but I'm going to pretend like I do so that I can feel smarter. And a fecal transplant technically doesn't fit into a vegan diet, but I won't tell anybody if you don't.
Oh, I get your line of thinking. So what you're saying is that instead of the chocolate milkshake, I could use something as simple as like a fecal transplant therapy.
Yes.
Perfect.
It gives you the look of the chocolate milkshake, but
well, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are in ketosis, and so it probably wouldn't be that difficult for me to gather the actual fecal matter.
Wow, we are connecting some dots today.
I like it. Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, having you as my guru, it's useful. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't be able to actually make these connections, to actually make these leaps. But I get where you're going. I'm taking some notes because I need to talk to my wife about this week's meal plan. But we can try this out. We can try it out. I'll do some self-quantification as well. As I'm moving forward on the substitutes that you've recommended. But I also I don't want to make people think that all you know about or all you're an expert in is nutrition, because I know that you know a lot that goes above and beyond just nutrition, like physical activity or exercise. For example, take a relatively trendy form of exercise that you see a lot of CrossFitters and power lifters doing these days, and that's rebounding. Doing like mini trampolining, for example, which seems to be really good for the lymph system and also for things like testosterone or estrogen or globulins or other things that I'm running out of my words now. But anyways, can you walk me through some of your favorite ways to use something like a mini trampoline or a rebounding workout for the people out there who are a little bit more serious when it comes to their exercise habits?
Yeah, and this is a serious form of exercise. I mean, before she died, my 90-year-old grandmother was rebounding.
Wow.
So I think the best way to get good results from being on a rebounder is not paying attention to the rebounding. So for me, how I like to biohack is I biohack my biohacking. So how can I get more result from this investment of time on the rebounder? The answer is doing a lot of other things that aren't rebounding while I'm also rebounding. For example, I'll have my earbuds in and I'll be listening to books on tape. I'll be listening to your podcast when this one with me comes out.
Right.
It'll be really educational. And then over my earbuds, I'll have headphones on listening to binaural beats. And, that's only doing 3 things at one time. So that's
you put the headphones over the earbuds.
Yeah. The earbuds over the headphones. I tried that for a month, just didn't work. So earbuds in first, headphones over the earbuds. And then at this point, we're only doing 3 things.
Right.
Learning book on tape, listening to binaural beats, getting our brain hemispheres synced up, brain waves manipulated, hacked, if you will. We're rebounding, getting our lymph moving. But, this is still amateur biohacking. So I like to go for the crescendo, add in the oxygen deprivation mask at the same time. Typically, by the end of this, I pass out face first on my back deck, and I wake up realizing the ending of the book.
That's actually a good sign of hypoxia or of a drop in your pulse oximetry. Again, when we're talking about biohacking without even spending a lot of money, in the same way that you could kind of avoid the need to buy ketone strips or blood ketone monitors by doing something like the underpants check that you mentioned. You could use something like whether or not you've passed out during the rebounding session as an alternative to like one of these more expensive, fingertip pulse oximetry devices or, any of these other self-quant tools that people are using.
And when we're underpants quanting our ketogenic state, I guarantee you're going to have results in by the end of your rebounding session.
Right.
No questions asked.
Right. And it's more ancestral as well when you can avoid some of the modern self-quantifying devices and some of the radiation that they can put on your body, regardless of whether or not you've eaten coconuts. We know that those are carcinogenic. Basically, in a similar way as our ancestors would have done, you just determine your amount of hypoxia by whether or not you've passed out on the rebounder.
No question about it. And getting back to the ancestral wisdom as well, that's rebounding. Our ancestors walked the same earth that had a different surface. It was much more spongy, springy-like, because with modern farming, we've depleted the soil, which has changed the soil structure. So it's got much less of a crumb structure to it. It has a lesser water holding capacity. So it's just like a harder ground. But what our ancestors would have been walking on is very rich soil, properly aerated with earthworms that weren't killed by chemicals that didn't exist yet, would have a great water holding capacity, wonderful crumb structure to it. So basically our ancestors were rebounding all day. It's like have you seen the pretend footage of when we pretended to land on the moon, Ben?
Yeah, exactly. The footage that they had to create after all of the camera rolls were destroyed by the actual radiation we know occurs as the spaceships come back from the moon.
Absolutely. So when we watch that pretend moonwalk, we see the astronauts are kind of like rebounding. Each step they go high. And the reason why that is the moon's soil hasn't been degraded through conventional farming.
Makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Also, from what I understand, and I don't know if you've heard about this before, but apparently there is actually not any glyphosate on the moon. So people who normally would not be able to eat gluten on planet Earth, they can actually eat gluten when they're on the moon because they don't have the compromised guts that glyphosate has caused. Have you looked into this at all?
No, but my hunch is that Monsanto doesn't like you speaking in any degree of a negative tone about glyphosate. So I just want to, my lawyer's handing me a message right now that says Ben's statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. There's been no difference shown between consuming a deadly chemical and not consuming that deadly chemical. So anyway, done with the legal read.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm looking pretty actively for nowadays is that double-blind research study that compares consumption of a loaf of bread, for example, in our favorite restaurant on the earth versus someone actually eating it on the moon to see if there actually is a difference in terms of things like diarrhea or constipation or bleeding guts. So it'd be interesting. But we're digressing from exercise because I've actually jotted down this idea of doing the headphones with the binaural beats, the earphones underneath with the audiobook. I like to do mine on closer to like a 3 to a 5 times speed, along with the training mask on the rebounder. This seems like a really, really good way to exercise. But for people who maybe don't have a trampoline or can't afford one, do you have any other exercise biohacks that you've found to be useful to maximize the time that you spend exercising?
Yeah, yoga is wonderful. So I highly recommend people watch some yoga classes. The enjoyment you're going to get is just off the charts. And if you're actually motivated to do real exercise, CrossFit, but CrossFit can be dangerous because some people don't approach CrossFit with the necessary reckless amount of intensity that you need to get hardcore results. So I like to practice of CrossFitting until I'm injured. Like, how do you know when the workout's over? When you're actually injured enough, you can't keep working out. Otherwise, you're just a quitter.
Right. Exactly. No, it makes sense. I mean, I'm a fan of hoisting heavy weights to complete exhaustion. I think that's probably from a biomechanical standpoint. Again, when we return to what our ancestors would have done, they likely would have. As they're building, for example, the stone wall, they probably would have in a very rabied and quick and frothing at the mouth type of fashion. I'm guessing with something very similar to like dubstep, they would have built the stone wall as quickly as possible. And if someone became injured, like a peasant or a peon or someone building the wall became injured, they probably would have just literally substituting them with someone else and taken the other person away in a wheelbarrow, which is really I think what we're trying to replicate with something like CrossFit. It would seem this same ancestral practice of exercising to complete injury in the face of exhaustion.
Yeah, I would agree. And once the stone wall was built and finished, you can bet your bile duct our ancestors would have kept lifting stones over their head if they weren't yet injured. And that's because intuitively they knew in order for the best chances of a good life, they needed to create as much muscle mass and as little body fat as possible to make their bodies as fuel inefficient as possible, because they didn't have a lot of food around necessarily. Yeah. They didn't just have a fridge full of food where they could be in an inefficient state and just need a lot of food because they couldn't depend on it. So they wanted to get to that state of being inefficient with fuel because it accelerated how fast, or better said, it accelerated the likelihood that they would die. And our ancestors were so spiritually in tune that they didn't actually believe in death. They just believed in reincarnation. So they figured out the more muscle I have, the less fat I have, the less fuel efficient I am. Therefore, the chances of me starving to death go up, which means the chances of me reincarnating go up.
So it's almost like an anti-aging technique.
Absolutely. It's like, yeah, what's the longevity? That's just like the fear of death.
Right.
So, yeah, not getting sucked into the anti-aging movement, but these guys knew better. It's not about the quantity of life. It's about the quality of your next life. Right. Anti-aging.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, speaking of death, constipation can be an issue for a lot of people. And I know that some people actually die of constipation. I mean, we've heard about people like Elvis Presley, dying with 30 to 40 pounds of impacted fecal matter in their colon. and I don't know if that's an old wives' tale or if it's actually true, but regardless, I do know that people do die, in whether it's in airport bathrooms or in the comfort of their own home, of things like constipation. Do you have, in terms of the research that you've done, because I know you're kind of on the cutting edge of a lot of these things, as we've obviously proven so far. Do you have any tips for enhancing digestion, enhancing the quality or the quantity of a bowel movement, or ensuring that things kind of move through the digestive tract more smoothly?
Yeah, there's a couple things that everybody better listen to on this, Ben. First off is eating at least a handful of digestive enzymes with every meal. Why? Because you don't want to be doing your own digesting like a peasant. Like, Ben, do you think Tom Cruise, with all of his hundreds of millions of dollars, do you think Tom Cruise cleans his own floors at home?
Yeah, I don't know.
Probably not.
I believe that as Christian scientists, they don't actually have floors. I'm pretty sure they just simply use the earth as a more ancestral form of Christian scientificry. But I think your analogy holds true regardless.
Well, and actually, Christian scientists don't believe in life-saving medical technology that's based on science. Therefore, Christian scientists, if you will, that are very scientific in an anti kind of way, they don't believe digestive enzymes exist. But Tom Cruise is one step more dramatic. He's a Scientologist, which is a wonderful nonfiction religion based on the science fiction novels of L. Ron Hubbard. So, long story short, Tom's got to be studying his Scientology science fiction novels instead of cleaning his own floor. So Tom Cruise doesn't treat himself like a peasant who's here to wash his own floors. So why would you want to be digesting your own food when you can have enzymes do it for you? So
the analogy is perfect. It's. I mean, sorry to interrupt. I mean, it's a perfect analogy between Tom Cruise cleaning his floor and the digestive enzymes. I wouldn't have thought of that myself, but yeah, it makes sense. I mean, like if we really truly want to live a more rich and fulfilling life, digesting our own food, having our stomachs digest our food for us. Yeah, it does seem, now that you say it, it's kind of silly.
Yeah, and just we've opened up a segue here. This is sort of like a biohack for teaching. If you want to teach anything effectively to your students, you will always want to use an analogy. And the best analogies always involve Tom Cruise, Scientology, and Christian Science. Put your concept into that holy trinity of an analogy, and your students will never forget what you just taught them. Which brings us to our next point. The other thing that I feel is so important for good bowel health is using a squatty potty. Really, and I'm not attached to any brand names, but obviously something that puts you in a and why I think this is so important is because
I want to interrupt you though, because I think it is important because it can actually be close to impossible to get into a squat position without the use of a squatty potty TM. I mean, just think about it. I mean, you have to actually plant your legs wide. You have to get your butt low. That's difficult to do without a trademark stool.
Yeah, and it's theorized, the one fault of nature's wisdom that worked through our ancestors when they were living in natural conditions, it's theorized that they actually pooped standing up, which, there's going to be a kink in the colon. They're not going to have good, full, complete bowel movements. But once these tools like the squatty potty were invented, now for the first time in human history, we can actually squat and therefore have a bowel movement.
It's very similar to birthing tubs. I mean, in the past, children would die right and left. Babies would die during birth or even before birth. Before the invention of the little blue tubs with the slide in them that women could bring into their homes for underwater birth or for what they call hydrotherapy birth. Before that, people used to die during childbirth all the time in the same way that people used to struggle, or I would hazard a guess, actually die during bowel movements before the invention of something like a squatty potty.
Yeah. And, some people live their whole lives never achieving their dreams. And I think in ancient times, some people would live their whole lives never having a bowel movement because they didn't know they could squat because the tool they needed to squat wasn't invented.
Right.
So, when you look at the research done on squatty potties, you'll see that there's a video online of a unicorn pooping out rainbow-colored ice cream. Mm-hmm. And because that's cute and entertaining, and it's just like downright funny, it really validates the effectiveness and the need for a squatty potty.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It's a somewhat offensive video, really, in my opinion. Just the whole idea behind, putting an animal on screen like that and abusing the actual, the honor and the glory that goes into the unicorn. Showing a unicorn defecating. I was personally a little bit offended about that. I would have rather have seen them use a more effective analogy, such as like a caveman or something like that instead of a unicorn, but.
The vegan community is just all up in arms.
Yeah.
And I also believe the Scientology community doesn't believe that squatty potties exist because they don't believe in unicorns for whatever reason. They're just like not evolved to look at the animal.
I haven't come across. I mean, I have the L. Ron Hubbard, the entire collection, the whole library. It takes up an entire room of my home, but I haven't actually come across the squatty potty in his book. So you're likely correct. I have a few other things I wanted to cover with you as well, though, because we've talked about poop and cannabis. So I want to talk about something else that's I guess just as much, kind of non-controversial and boring, but something we should bring up because this is a scientific show, and that is sex. I know that as someone who is well-versed in enhancing spirituality, that you may have some tips for people who are interested in things like sexual energy or tantra or enhancing or up-leveling themselves from a sexual standpoint. Do you have any best practices or even biohacks for maximizing something like sexual energy or sexual experiences?
Yeah, the most effective one is having a partner who is not ugly. Number two, practicing polyamory and, having an open relationship, because human beings, by human beings, I mean men only, we're not meant to be with just one person.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we can tell that humans aren't meant to be with just one person because various animal species in the animal kingdom don't just have one exclusive mate their entire life.
Right.
Which
like fruit flies.
Yeah. So that is an obvious parallel justification for why humans should behave like fruit flies. Mm-hmm. And then, polyamory, really, for the listeners who aren't really familiar with that term, it's the fine art of being so codependent that you need more than one partner to meet your emotional needs for you, while pretending that you're so filled with unconditional love that you need to share your love with multiple partners.
Right, exactly. And I mean, in addition to the display of those type of open relationships, we see that quite a bit in the insect kingdom, not just fruit flies, but also, wood beetles. I think termites probably fall into that category. I mean, ants are polyamory when you... Oh yeah, when you flip over a rock, I mean, you usually see at least half a dozen ants riding on top of the backs of other ants, but then they'll be switching and riding upon the backs of other ants, and so Yeah, and then also there's a really good there's a good Disney movie about this as well. I think it's called Pollyanna. It's a little bit of an older movie, but a really good wholesome flick to sit down and watch with the family when it comes to maybe understanding polyamory a little bit better. I haven't actually seen it. I'm guessing, just judging by the title, that it'd probably be a pretty good introduction. Plus, it's Disney.
Yeah, so that's everything Disney is something about polyamory. And
right.
But you're right, that movie, it from a symbolic perspective, it's all these metaphoric lessons on polyamory. You just have to make sure to open your mind so you're watching it from a place of higher consciousness where you're taking it in symbolically, not literally.
Right. Now, like I mentioned when I was introducing you, you actually do have a new book called How to Be Ultra Spiritual, 12 and a half Steps to Spiritual Superiority. It's on Amazon, and I would imagine other places where books are sold. But one thing, whenever I hear the word spirituality, the very first word that comes to mind, in addition to polyamory and ketosis, is chakra. Now, do you have any tips for people who really want to activate as many chakras as possible? People who want to, for example, biohack their chakras. What would be the best way to do that?
Squeezing your pelvic floor muscles while you're meditating. For example, before you and I got on the line today, Ben, I did a 3-hour meditation, but it only took me 5 minutes. So I biohacked my way into such a deep meditative state by squeezing my pelvic floor muscles. What that does is it sends an energetic wave of Kundalini energy up through all the chakras.
Okay.
Which somehow makes them very active. And having active chakras is obviously superior to having inactive chakras.
Have you found that amount of clenching or squeezing that you need to activate those chakras limits your ability to be able to quantify ketosis? I mean, do the two kind of fly in the face of each other, the ability to actually get adequate anal leakage, but then also squeeze the pelvic muscles enough to where you activate your Kundalini chakras?
Well, they really complement each other well. So when you're doing the chakra opening pelvic floor meditative squeeze, your ability to eat more fat and therefore get more ketones in your blood before you reach the peak state of first anal leakage, it goes up. So in other words, more fat, less anal leakage equals more fat to get the anal leakage, which equals more ketosis,
right,
which equals more is better, which equals more than better is best.
Yeah, which we've already established based on the concept of macrodosing. But I'm curious, what about technology? I mean, there's programs out there, like 40 years of Zen, for example, where you'll attach special electrodes to your head to be able to get into as deep a state of meditation as possible, but not actually need to be a monk or say like go to a monastery or learn how to focus or mindfulness or something silly like that to actually do it. You instead just use technology. Do you have any favorite pieces of technology that you use in addition to something like a training mask to actually activate chakras or to drive yourself into a deeper state of spirituality?
There are a few things, and you bring up a beautiful point. How to get all the meditative results without being meditative. Now, a problem with electrodes on your head is I find those don't really contract my pelvic floor muscles very well. But there's a wonderful biohack that I found to significantly increase one's spiritual consciousness, and that's take a picture of yourself meditating and post it to Instagram. So there's this beautiful phenomenon that happens where when people see you being spiritual, doing something spiritual like meditating, you become more spiritual. And there's the old question, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? So let me translate that into this topic. if you do something spiritual and there's nobody there to observe you doing something spiritual, did you actually become more spiritual?
Right.
The answer is
likely not.
No, you did not.
Right.
But what's the size of your Instagram following? That's how many potential somebodies can be there to see you doing something spiritual, which makes you more spiritual. So, yeah, there's a lot of apps and equipment out there, but I find an Instagram account with a solid following is the best technology biohack for increased spirituality.
Now, what about the use of something a little bit more, I guess, again, very similar to what our ancestors would have done, and that would be the use of something like essential oils to enhance that spiritual process or to enhance that meditative process. Do you use essential oils at all in the same way that our ancestors would have?
I do. I think it's essential to use essential oils based on the name of the oils. And again, you bring in...
I never thought about that.
Yeah. And you're so good at bringing in the ancestral wisdom, because with essential oils, would our ancestors 10,000 years ago be crushing 150 pounds of lavender to get 1.5 ounces of lavender oil? Absolutely, they would have been doing that.
Yeah, so it's related to the stone wall analogy, right? I mean, they probably would have figured out ways to exercise in as hard and hopefully as in as inefficient a way possible in order to maximize the onset of death. So yeah, I mean, 150 pounds of lavender leaves that they could crush would, to me, make sense.
Absolutely. That's why the whole stone wall is there. They're grinding the other stones to crush the lavender leaves.
Right.
And then they had tons of multi-level marketing companies to distribute the oils. I mean, our ancestors loved business opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, yes, I absolutely love essential oils. From a medical perspective, they work on the principle that says if something smells good, then it's good for you. Mm-hmm. So I love to use essential oils to treat common ailments instead of using remedies that actually work. Why? Because I leave smelling better, and I think that gives me a better result.
Yeah, and it's a good point too when it comes to the actual smell test to determine whether or not something is good for you. I mean, there's been so many times when I've walked past a restaurant and been unable to look at the menu, but if you can simply kind of like put your nose in the door and smell something like chili cheese fries, for example, as most of us know. Not only is that a very good way to do something like stay in ketosis, we also know that potatoes are gluten-free. And so something like that would be, a very simple way to determine whether or not something is going to serve you or whether it's going to work against you. I mean, nobody, for example, is out there eating, dog poop, for example, unless they're wanting to do a fecal transplant. But this smell test is probably the reason why. It's probably exactly what our ancestors would have done is smelled something. If it smells good, then you should eat it.
And the moral of Ben's story, dear listeners, is he's telling you should use chili cheese fries essential oil. Did I hear your message correctly, Ben? There's
actually 3 essential oils that I swear by. One is lavender for relaxation. Mm-hmm. One is peppermint. I don't know if you've used that before, but peppermint works really well, especially like 100% peppermint, something that will burn away the lining of your lips. I prefer because it's got a
therapeutic.
Well, it's wakefulness enhancing. When you burn the lining of the lips away, it's actually been proven that increases your focus and your feelings of wakefulness. And then finally, the chili cheese fries essential oil, what I've found that's best for is increasing appetite. You smear a little bit just below your nose, and I mean you can be suffering like from cachexia-like cancer issues when it comes to suppression of appetite. You can, be consuming all the cannabis you want, but there really doesn't seem to be much superior to essential oil of chili cheese fries on the upper lip, specifically to actually do something like enhance your appetite or your ability to consume the number of fats necessary to stay in ketosis.
You are a wealth of wisdom, Ben. Yeah. By the way, when we're done with our conversation, when we're off air, I do want to tell you about a great business opportunity.
That's the one word that perks my ears up, really. When I see it on the menu of a website, especially opportunity, that's usually a sign to me that it is a rock solid website, a rock solid company, and a good way for me to enhance my income, or at least my a good car payment. Now,
wouldn't you like to be able to provide a lot of abundance for your family, Ben? Mm-hmm. Opportunity with a capital O. That's what's coming at you.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk about that afterwards. I did have another question that I wanted to ask you, though, to kind of come full circle. I mean, we started talking about weed, so we might as well come full circle to this, and that's back to plant-based medicines, because there's another plant-based medicine that I hear a lot of talk of, ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is something that you'll see a lot of people doing these days, especially like Silicon Valley execs and CEOs. And so I'm hazarding a guess that it's probably pretty important for something, like you were mentioning income recently, and I'm guessing there's a direct link between it and success. But in terms of ayahuasca, have you ever experimented with plant-based medicines like that, whether micro or macro dosing?
Yeah, in fact, nowadays I'm never not on ayahuasca. And the beauty of ayahuasca is it gives you the ability to attain a level of enlightenment that you're not enlightened enough to attain on your own. And it's permanent enlightenment as long as you continue to habitually use ayahuasca. And I've also found in my research that there's a direct correlation between how high a plant gets you and how medicinal it is, how awakening it is. And because ayahuasca blitzes you right out of your mind, it's medicinal. And to me, there is nothing more spiritual, nothing more expanding than blissfully merging into a state of oneness with all that is, while aggressively filling your pants with heroic doses of diarrhea. So that's why ayahuasca is my favorite plant medicine.
Now, when you do something like ayahuasca, how do you actually use that to discover truths about yourself, or to have something like a breakthrough? I mean, is it as simple as getting as high as possible? Do you need to get to the state where you throw up? I mean, do you have any best practices for something like ayahuasca?
I do. First off, good music is obviously a given. The other thing is there's a lot of shaman who practice ancient native wisdom in the Amazon, Peru, Costa Rica. And these shaman are wonderful guides up the spiritual mountain. And you want to avoid them because they're so inconvenient to get to.
Yeah.
I mean, you get on a plane, you have to go through I don't have a good Wi-Fi connection here. So for best results, to really biohack the whole plant medicine system, I think to respect the sacredness of ayahuasca, it's important to order it online and make it at home with some friends who are out to have a good time. And that really creates the appropriate setting for beneficial breakthroughs.
Right. Wow. You just save people a lot. Well, you may have actually cost them a few Bitcoins, but you've saved them a lot of money and heartache from having to go and do things, I guess in a more, speaking of ancestral, I guess sometimes living in an ancestral way can come back to bite you when you actually have to get on an airplane and fly to the Amazon to do your plant-based medicine. but it does make sense. I suppose it ordering it to the comfort of your own home and doing it with friends, and then following your recommendations to get as high as possible, to use good music when doing it. And then in terms of the throwing up, right? Like that's one of the things that's kind of like made me nervous about something like ayahuasca. Is that necessary, or can you actually, do something like wear a training mask or some other mechanism to keep throw up from coming up?
Well, I love how ambitious you are. I've never used a training mask, but my philosophy of go hard, go home, which is, that's really applied in a lot of fraternity party settings, is if you're not drinking enough ayahuasca to throw up, then you're not drinking enough ayahuasca.
Right.
So we really want to consider that. And I also want to highlight one of your points you mentioned about ancient wisdom. When it comes to the inconvenience of ancient wisdom, getting on an airplane to meet with a shaman who's quote unquote reputable and a quote unquote good person who cares. That's what I would call inconvenient ancient wisdom. So in those cases, I find it very beneficial to just term that outdated ancient wisdom. So a more modern approach is what we talked about. Like, well, let's order it online and not kill a whole week to journey with ayahuasca, but we'll just hit it hard one afternoon, definitely during daylight hours, because it's just, more convenient that way.
Right. And that's better for the circadian rhythm as well, to do your plant-based medicine in the presence of blue light or sunlight or good UVA, UVB, infrared, vitamin D type of light. That just makes sense. That again comes down to the simple act of hacking life, right? Like why not actually expose yourself to natural sunlight as you're getting high on ayahuasca, as our ancestors would have done. JP, I've got one other question for you, and that is in this new book. I mean, it's hundreds of pages, jam-packed with tips. Obviously, Tony Robbins endorses it highly, and so I know that it must be a good book because he typically does not endorse books. But I'm curious if you actually have a tip, like a top tip or a favorite tip from the book that you haven't had a chance yet to mention on the show. Something you want to throw in there as like a final bonus for folks.
I will say this,
so they don't have to buy your book.
I will say very little of this, so you will have to buy my book. No pressure. I mean, life will just be crap without it, but it is what it is. What you'll find out in the book is that the biggest impediment to spiritual growth is being a human. And the thing that makes you most human is your emotions and your feelings. So I've got a whole chapter called Feelings Buried Alive, Help You Thrive. So the top tip is go into denial of anything that makes you human, and a denial about you being in denial, and you'll think it's actually gone just because you're not perceiving it. Therefore, you'll disconnect from that human reality of yours, and you'll be better able to think that you're more spiritual.
So basically pretend that you're not human.
And then pretend that you're not pretending that you're not human.
Got it. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense. And, in terms of advice and tips that we've gotten on podcast episodes before, this would probably be one of the better ones out there. And so if you're trying to enhance your life, if you're trying to do anything from burn fat to gain muscle to optimize digestion to increase your IQ or cognitive power, a big part of it is just basically really, really realizing that you're not actually a human being. It's a very logical way to proceed, in my opinion.
We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And, Ben, I'd like to thank you because after this conversation with you, I feel like much less of a person now.
Yeah.
But much more of a spiritual being.
Yeah. Probably in the same way that a fruit fly in its random ramblings of polyamorous activity would feel, I would imagine. And we've learned a lot about fruit flies and plenty more. Ayahuasca, cannabis, activating as many of the body's chakras as possible, the squatty potty, mini trampolines, gradated compression boots, essential oils, you name it. I'm going to put a link not only to all of that stuff, along with my discount code so I can make as much money as possible off of the guest who I've invited on this podcast who has appeared for absolutely free. But I'm going to put a link to all those things over at bengreenfieldfitness.com/spiritual. And I'll also link over to JP's YouTube channel where he's got plenty of tips, everything from how to be a vegan to even more tips on ayahuasca to sexual health to ketosis and more, as well as his book, How to Be Ultra Spiritual, 12 and a half Steps to Spiritual Superiority. So again, that's all over at bengreenfieldfitness.com/spiritual. Be sure to click on as many of the links as possible so that I can afford to buy ayahuasca. JP, thank you so much for coming on the show, man, and sharing all this stuff with us. You've been a wealth of wisdom.
Thank you for having me on, Ben. You're a gentleman, you're a Caucasian, and you're a scholar.
That means a lot. All right, folks. Well, until next time, I'm Ben Greenfield, along with JP Sears, signing out from bengreenfieldfitness.com. Have a healthy week.
You've been listening to the Ben Greenfield Fitness Podcast. Go to bengreenfieldfitness.com for even more cutting-edge fitness and performance advice.